The chamber was silent except for the sharp echo of a single shot. A human, no older than 30, with unkempt brown hair and eyes that had seen far too much, collapsed to the cold, polished floor. His body hit the ground with a sickening thud, the force of the impact mingling with the sharp metallic scent of blood that filled the room. It was supposed to be clean. Efficient. The council had decided this was the end of the human species. But as the alien soldier stood above him, the human's mouth opened in an unsettling smile. Laughter. Deep, gut-wrenching laughter spilled from the human's cracked lips. The sound was harsh, jagged, like broken glass grinding against metal. The soldiers, towering and composed in their uniformed black exoskeletons, exchanged looks. The sound was not what they had expected. No screams, no pleas for mercy. Only laughter. Zarth, the leader of the council, narrowed his obsidian eyes, his mind racing. He had seen violence before. His people, the Zirians, had ruled the galaxy for millennia, exterminating races they deemed weak, subjugating those who resisted. But this was different. The human had been shot in the chest, his heart punctured, his lungs collapsing. And yet he laughed. The laughter echoed, filling the chamber with a sense of unease that Zarth could not shake. "Why do you laugh?" he demanded, his voice an unsettling blend of authority and disbelief. The human's chest heaved, his breath ragged. His lips twisted into a grin, the blood from his wound staining his teeth. You really thought you could break us?" Zarth's mind flashed with images of the human uprising, of the endless waves of humans pushing against his people, against their technology, their might. There had been whispers among the galaxy's underbelly of this strange, new resilience in humans, some kind of unyielding spirit that his people had yet to comprehend. And now this man, on the brink of death, mocked them with a laugh. What was this force that drove them? "You're broken," Vera, one of the council members, muttered, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. She was one of Zarth's most trusted officers, known for her analytical mind. But even she seemed unnerved by the human's behavior. "This one, he's almost dead." "Almost," Zarth repeated, the word lingering in the air as he bent down closer to the human, the cold surface beneath his boots feeling like it had shifted beneath him. He reached out and touched the human's shoulder, expecting some sign of collapse, but the man remained still, laughing through the pain. "Your species, so fragile, yet so defiant." The human's eyes twitched, meeting Zarth's. For a moment, the two locked gazes, one alien, towering with power, the other, a broken human, crumpled on the floor but still unyielding. "Defiant?" The human's voice cracked, but his words were laced with something stronger than pain. "No. You don't understand. You never will." Zarth felt something cold press against his spine, something he hadn't felt in centuries, doubt. "Why do you laugh, human?" Zarth's voice was sharper now, the commanding tone replacing his earlier disbelief. The human paused, his laughter slowly subsiding into a faint chuckle, as though savoring some inside joke. "Because you can't kill what's already dead." He spat blood onto the floor, his grin growing wider. "You should have finished us off when you had the chance. You should have burned our world. But you didn't. And now you'll see. All of you." A pulse of confusion rippled through Zarth, and for the briefest of moments, the cold, ordered reality of his people wavered. What was this human saying? What did he mean by, already dead? Before Zarth could demand an answer, the human's body shuddered, his breathing slowing, as if he were surrendering to the inevitable. But then, another burst of laughter, quieter this time, but just as haunting. Zarth stood, his fingers curling into fists, as the weight of this unexpected turn settled upon him. "No, this couldn't be. This is just one human. A single specimen." Vera's voice was an attempt at reassurance, but it was strained. "We've eradicated species far more dangerous than this." Zarth turned his back to the dying human, meeting the eyes of his council. "If this human represents all of humanity, then we are facing something unlike any force we've ever encountered." And then, as Zarth's hand hovered over a communication panel, a chilling realization gripped him. The universe had not feared the Xyrians in thousands of years. But humanity? Humanity had just done something that could unravel everything they had built. This was no ordinary war. It was a war with an enemy that couldn't be understood, couldn't be broken. Prepare the fleet, Zarth ordered, his voice cold with the certainty of war. We've made a mistake. The humans won't break. And we are going to have to kill them all to find out why. As the laughter died in the background, a new kind of war began to rise, and Zarth could feel the weight of the galaxies shifting. The walls of the Xyrian council chamber hummed with the low whine of atmosphere control systems, but the air felt suffocating nonetheless. Zarth stood by the viewport, staring out into the star-filled expanse, though his mind was far from the distant glow of the galaxies. His thoughts were locked on the human, the one who had defied death, mocked their superiority, and laughed. That laugh haunted him. What did it mean? He turned slowly, his sharp features catching the light from the flickering hollow boards in the room. The council had assembled. 7 towering figures, clad in their obsidian armor, now stood in uneasy silence. Their leader was no longer sure of their strength. If the humans' laughter had not driven the first stake into the heart of their empire, this doubt certainly had. Report. Zartha's voice was terse, each word measured, deliberate. Vera, standing at his side, was the first to speak. The analytical one, always calm, always precise. And yet today, even her composure was shaken. The human, he was a soldier, one among many of his kind we've captured, she began, her gaze flickering to the data scrolling on her wrist console. Our interrogation methods were standard, but he withstood every attempt. When we placed the gun to his chest, she hesitated. The words felt too small, too fragile to capture the terror of what had transpired. He smiled. And then he laughed. Zarth could feel the pressure building inside him. Why? Vera's eyes narrowed. We're still analyzing the physiological anomalies. The laughter, it wasn't madness. It was almost... She searched for the word. It was mocking. Mocking. It was a word that left an acidic taste in Zartha's mouth. The laughter was a message, and he was beginning to realize it wasn't just from one human, it was from all of them. A message meant to shatter his people's invincible image. But what did it mean? How could something so fragile endure? We cannot allow this to spread, Zarth muttered, more to himself than to the council. We've already begun preparations for the offensive, Vera responded, her voice carrying the weight of inevitability. The human fleet, if we can call it that, is preparing to engage. But we don't fully understand their technology. The human resistance has been far more resilient than expected. Resilient, Zarth repeated, his mind racing. He glanced at the viewport again, his thoughts flickering to the fleet that would soon descend on the human colonies. The decision had been made. War was now inevitable. But what if it wasn't just the humans they were fighting? The doors to the chamber slid open, and a new figure entered, one who commanded attention without effort. Talthar, the youngest council member, and one of Zartha's most ambitious strategists. His presence alone seemed to sharpen the already palpable tension in the room. You're still dwelling on the humans' laughter, Zarth, Talthar said, his voice clipped and brimming with impatience. We need to focus. The fleet is gathering. The humans may be resilient, but we are Xyrians. They cannot withstand our firepower. Zarth turned toward him, eyes narrowing. Talthar was eager to strike, eager to conquer, but he didn't understand. Not yet. It's more than that. This isn't just about firepower, Talthar. This is about something deeper. He paced the length of the chamber, the sleek surface beneath his boots silent and unyielding. These humans, they're not afraid. They're not like us. Talthar scoffed. You're letting this resilience cloud your judgment. We crush their fleets, burn their worlds, and this will all be over. But that's the point. Zarth stopped in front of Talthar, his voice quiet but firm. They won't break. If we destroy their worlds, their people will only grow stronger. This resilience, it's not a weakness. It's their strength. A murmur spread through the council, but before anyone could voice an opinion, Vera spoke again. Zarth is right. We've seen it before, races that refuse to submit, that adapt and evolve in ways we cannot predict. She paused. We underestimated them. Talthar's face twisted with frustration. We have the upper hand. We have technology, numbers. And we have arrogance. Zarth interrupted, his voice cutting through the words. This is no longer about firepower. If we strike too soon, we risk invoking something we cannot control. The room fell into a heavy silence. Zarth felt it, the creeping doubt, the uncertainty that gnawed at him. Could it be that the humans had unlocked something in themselves? Something that made them impossible to defeat? Suddenly, a harsh beep interrupted the stillness, and a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the room. A map of the human colonies appeared, flashing red as fleets and resources were tracked in real time. Vera's eyes widened. They're mobilizing faster than we anticipated. Zartha's gaze hardened. Prepare the fleet. But this time, I want every weapon ready. His voice was a quiet storm of authority. We strike them all. But we do it carefully. Talthar, his eagerness still written in every line of his body, nodded. But there was doubt in his eyes now, and that was something Zarth had never seen before. As the council moved to carry out their orders, Zarth stood alone for a moment longer, staring into the deep void of space, feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. The war was coming. But the humans, the ones who had laughed in the face of death, would not fall easily. And perhaps, for the first time in Zarth's long life, that thought terrified him. Zarth stood on the observation deck of the Zirian flagship, his eyes fixed on the star systems below, the soft glow of distant suns painting his dark features in pale light. He had called for this meeting, this moment of clarity, yet his mind raced with unease. The humans, with their resilience, their laughter, had disrupted everything. They weren't like any enemy he had ever faced. The humans are readying their fleets. Vera's voice broke the silence. Her figure loomed beside him, her face set in cold resolve. The human resistance was a threat, a reality that no amount of firepower could erase if they underestimated it. I know. Zartha's voice was tight, strained by a weight he hadn't anticipated. But we're not just fighting their fleets anymore. We're fighting something much darker. He turned his gaze toward the holographic map that spread before him, lines of red marking human colonies now hardened and fortified. The rebellion has taken root. They fight like they have nothing left to lose. Vera studied the map, her fingers tracing the movements of human forces as they shifted across the systems. We've defeated rebellions before. The humans may be tenacious, but they lack the coordination of a true empire. We have the numbers. And yet they refuse to fall. Zartha's eyes narrowed. They adapt. Every time we strike, they evolve. You've seen the reports. They fight with no fear, no hesitation. Vera didn't respond, but the silence between them spoke volumes. She understood. They had crossed a threshold, one that couldn't be undone with the push of a button or the roar of weapons. The council had called for an immediate strike on the human stronghold on Solara, a vast city-world nestled at the heart of the human resistance. It was a calculated move, but in the back of Zartha's mind, a gnawing question persisted. What if the humans were waiting for them? What if they had already planned their counterattack? We'll deploy a full assault on Solara, Vera said, breaking his thoughts. We can't afford another delay. If we wipe out their command center, the resistance will crumble. Zarth turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers with a calculating intensity. You don't get it, do you? It's not just about winning. It's about understanding them. What drives them? What fuels this defiance? He turned away again, pacing the length of the deck. His boots clicked against the metal floor, the sound too sharp in the quiet of the room. These humans, they aren't like us. They're driven by something deeper. Something we don't fully comprehend. Their spirit, it's like a fire that refuses to burn out. Vera's eyes flickered, a hint of something new in her expression. You're starting to believe in their resilience, aren't you? Zarth didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the holographic map, but his thoughts had drifted elsewhere. The laughter. The way that human had smiled, even as death closed in. It had haunted him. For the first time, Zarth found himself questioning the very foundation of his belief in Zirian's superiority. He had once thought his species untouchable, invincible. But the humans, they were different. "We don't have time for doubt," Vera continued, her tone unwavering. "We need to strike, before they can fortify any more. This is our chance." Zartha's hand clenched into a fist at his side. He could hear the orders echoing in his mind, the call for destruction, the need to eliminate this threat once and for all. But something held him back, an unshakable sense that if they destroyed the humans now, they might never truly understand them. "Prepare the fleet," Zarth finally said, his voice colder than it had been before. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "But no matter what happens, we make sure we don't just crush them. We learn from them. This war, this fight, will define us." Vera didn't question him. Instead, she nodded sharply, her focus shifting to the data streams flickering across the room. She knew better than to argue now. But as she moved toward the door, her words lingered in Zartha's mind. "We can't afford to learn too late." The fleet was already in motion. Solara was the next target. But Zarth couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another battle, it was a turning point. For better or worse, the outcome of this war would reshape everything. The humans might have been a mystery, but in their defiance, they had already changed the course of history. And as Zarth gazed out once more at the vast expanse of stars, a troubling thought crept into his mind: what if the humans had already won, without even firing a shot? The question lingered, unanswered, as the countdown to war began. The sky over Solara was a fractured canvas of fire and dust. The Zirian fleet, a monstrous array of sleek, obsidian ships, had arrived in force, their weapons primed and their engines thrumming with power. The entire human resistance was arrayed before them, a ragtag force of defiance, struggling to hold their ground against an empire that had crushed countless civilizations before them. Yet Zarth could not shake the gnawing sensation in the pit of his stomach. The humans, these fragile, imperfect creatures, had already proven they could endure the unimaginable. What if this war, this conflict he had instigated, was already lost? He stood at the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the planet below. The tension in the air was suffocating. The fleet's readiness was at its peak, but the thought of facing an enemy who did not fear death unsettled him in ways he could not explain. These humans, they were different. They fought with a fire he hadn't seen in his own people in centuries. "Sir?" Vera's voice cut through the static of his thoughts. "The human fleet is preparing for engagement. We're tracking their movements. They're more organized than expected." Zartha's eyes never left the planet below. "They're not just fighting to win, are they?" he muttered. "They're fighting because they believe they have something to prove." Vera didn't answer right away. She knew the weight behind his words. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. In the midst of their advanced technology and superior firepower, the humans had something that the Zirians did not: a soul-deep resilience, an instinct to survive no matter the cost. That defiance, no matter how Zarth crushed them, no matter how many they destroyed, it only seemed to grow. "We've engaged their fleets," Vera continued, pulling up real-time data on the screen. "Our first wave is hitting their defenses now. But they're not retreating, they're digging in." "Just as I thought," Zarth muttered, his hand brushing over the console's smooth surface. "They won't surrender. It's not in their nature." On the ground, the human resistance had already started fighting back. Zarth had expected chaos, fear, panic. What he found instead were coordinated strikes, calculated maneuvers, and a near-perfect display of strategy. The humans fought with an intensity that had no equal, almost as if they had learned to weaponize desperation itself. "Their resistance is stronger than anticipated," one of the officers reported, his voice tense. "Our forces are meeting heavier resistance at all key points." Zartha's fists clenched. The arrogance he had once held about the superiority of his species was beginning to crumble. These humans, these mortal beings, were challenging everything he had believed in. Every victory felt hollow, as if they were winning battles only to lose something far more important, the war for their respect. And then it came, an incoming transmission, a bold challenge. The human resistance had taken the audacity to broadcast a message, straight to the heart of the Zirian fleet. Zartha's eyes narrowed. He motioned for the transmission to be opened, his chest tightening with anticipation. The voice that came through was steady, calm, and unmistakably human. "You may have conquered empires, Zarth." The human leader's voice rang clear across the comms. "But you've never fought anyone who refuses to die." The words cut through the room, freezing the officers into stunned silence. Zarth felt the weight of those words deep in his bones, the final realization that this was no ordinary war. It was a war of wills, a battle for survival that would either make or break both their species. "Let's see if your kind can truly endure," Zarth said, his voice cold and final. He turned toward Vera, who stood, watching him with a mix of admiration and something far darker. "Prepare the next wave. But take no prisoners." Vera nodded, though her eyes seemed clouded with doubt. "As you wish, Commander. But we may be underestimating them. We've already lost 3 key ships. We cannot afford to." "I will not lose this," Zarth interrupted sharply. His resolve had hardened, his belief in Zirian's superiority stubbornly intact. "Prepare to deploy our last offensive. Solara will fall today." As the orders were given, Zarth turned once more to the view of the planet below. His heart raced with anticipation, yet a growing unease gnawed at him. He had come to this moment believing that he held all the power. But the humans, no matter how many ships he crushed, no matter how many planets he burned, they would keep coming. And what if, in the end, it wasn't Zarth who broke them, but the fire inside the humans that burned through everything? The fleet was ready. The final assault was about to begin. But as Zarth looked at the battle unfolding below, the weight of the decision pressed on him. The war was not about weapons. It was about spirit. And humanity, he realized with a sickening certainty, had already won the one thing that could never be taken away: their will to live, their refusal to break. It was only a matter of time before the Zirians understood that the true battle had already been lost. The humans' laughter echoed in his mind, haunting and relentless.